Many of you have probably been at work when, even though it wasn't your job, or maybe not even technically allowed, you helped someone out. You might have abandoned your post to help someone carry groceries to their car, or maybe you took an extra 10 minutes to listen to some lonely customer who you knew wasn't going to buy anything, but who clearly needed to tell you a story about their cat, pigeon, or past life, even though paying customers were waiting. The point is, it wasn't your job, but your workplace became the spot for you to do something good for another human, to show someone that they're worth the time of day just because they are. Others among you might have wanted to help, but been told it would have been inappropriate or made you look unprofessional. My job is in research on homelessness, where I often find myself really wanting to help someone out. But I'm just as often told it's not my place as a researcher. But why isn't it? Researchers should expand the boundaries of what a researcher can do, not only because this can increase the impact of our work, but also because our position is one of such privilege, it only makes sense to use that privilege to help others as much as possible. Yes, research is always meant to do good, but it's not guaranteed that our work will have any impact at all. Researchers who are working in communities can do more to ensure their work has impact, to foster community building, and to provide immediate benefits for participants. Researchers who are early on in their career, like me, might think they don't have much privilege. As a student, I certainly don't have access to the same kind of funding and power that a well-established researcher does. However, my position does allow me some affordances that I can share and leverage for the good of others. And by affordances, I mean those things that my environment and my positionality afford me. For example, I do have the ability to seek out innovative ways to mobilize research findings. A peer researcher is somebody with lived experience of the issue they're studying. As a peer researcher studying youth homelessness, I've tried to find ways to incorporate community building and immediate benefit for participants into my work, by recognizing and sharing my affordances, and by mobilizing the knowledge, using what participants tell me as soon as possible. I like to think in terms of affordances because this word emphasizes the fact that you don't have to be well off in order to help others. We're not all in positions of privilege, but most of us are in a position that does offer us unique affordances. You'll often hear us social science researchers moaning that we get less financial investment than the hard sciences. And this is true, but we're still part of an enormous industry. In 2019, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, SSHRC, invested more than $370 million in research studies across the country. That's more than $250 million just from one funding body alone. And yet the most common research outputs we produce with our findings are academic journal articles and conference presentations. And these are great for building our own resumes and careers, but they're not so great at supporting real social change, nor at impacting the lives of the people who make our research possible, and the participants. When we're playing with this kind of money, we can't call it a day as soon as we've published something that might generate a change somewhere down the line. We need to ensure that our work is making a difference right now. The truth is, some youth didn't survive long enough to see the end of my study. I've managed to improve my research practices in two ways. First, by coming up with interesting ways to mobilize my research findings as quickly as possible. Taking what I learn and using that knowledge, as well as sharing it with others before the research is completed. And secondly, by thinking about how I can share my affordances with the young people I meet. Researchers usually offer participants some form of compensation for their time. But when it comes to speaking about experiences of homelessness, it's never really enough. Youth often tell me really intimate and painful details about their lives during a research interview. So $20 just doesn't cut it. I wanted to do more, but I didn't have enough money to offer more cash. So instead, I thought about what my position affords me. As a student, it affords me credibility. People tend to listen to and believe me now. That's a big difference from when I was on the streets. So I reached out to 2 grocery stores, and both agreed to donate gift cards. That meant each participant got $20 plus another $35 in cards. Now, that's still not enough, but it was one small effort to do more than just meet the status quo. Reaching out to those shops also turned out to be a great way to engage a couple of community members in talks about homelessness. Neither shop owner had realized this issue was so prevalent in our city, and both asked me to tell them what I'd learned so far. During research, I've tried to listen to what youth say and use their messages not only to encourage change in general, but also to shape my own practices. My research explores the school-based experiences of homeless youth, and many participants have told me stories about what I refer to as a champion teacher. They describe teachers who go above and beyond their job description to help them. And even though it didn't prevent or end their homelessness, it really made a difference in their lives. As I was thinking about how to mobilize knowledge, as I collected it, rather than waiting to the end of the study, I also became conscious about how the research process itself might actually reproduce some of the negative experiences that youth were telling me about. For example, they often talked about being used or dumped by adults. Several told me they thought that the adults that were supposed to be helping them were only in it for a paycheck. And now here I am, showing up, using them to harvest data, giving them a bit of cash and some gift cards, and then disappearing from their life. The exact opposite of what a champion teacher would do. So I started to tell participants they could stay in touch with me if they wanted to. I told them that I was a student and a peer researcher, not a professional support, but that they could reach out to me as a peer if they wanted. This is controversial because traditionally researchers are taught to be objective, meaning they keep a professional distance from their participants, and they believe this distance prevents their biases from impacting the study. As a peer researcher, I don't imagine objectivity as possible. My research is intimately connected to my lived experience and all the bias that comes with it. Quite a few participants did choose to stay in touch with me. They might send me updates about their work or school, or write to me just because they had an issue they wanted to tell someone about. I usually couldn't help, but one affordance that I did have was time. I could listen to and respond to them, which is something that from life and research I know youth don't always have. Sometimes I could help because they just needed peer support, like help filling out an application or accompanying them to an appointment. Better yet, I wasn't getting paid to do these things, so youth knew I was there simply because I cared. When you're experiencing homelessness as a young person, people tend to only do things for you if A, they're getting paid to do it because it's their job, and even then it doesn't mean they'll treat you nicely, or B, when they want something in return from you. I only want youth to pay it forward, in whatever way they can, whenever they can. It might be tomorrow, it might be 20 years from now. It doesn't matter. The trusting relationships that have developed between me and former research participants isn't something that can be accomplished in a short period of time. Their experiences have often taught them not to trust, and rightfully so. But by staying in touch, over time, the result has been this group of peers, of adults and youth with lived experience, as well as adult allies, working together informally to support and advocate for homeless youth in Ottawa. And the whole time I've been doing this, people have told me, it's not my job, you're playing at front line, it's not research. To those people, I say, 1, my place as a researcher isn't set in stone. Our work norms are always evolving, and many of us can be part of shaping this change if we are willing to say and do things that other people will tell us can't be done. 2, if researchers are in a position where they frequently interact with homeless youth, they're probably going to find themselves in a situation that reflects frontline work at some point. For example, a participant calls you up late at night and says they're in a dangerous situation with nowhere else to go. If you're not willing to respond to these kind of issues, you should probably think twice about designing a study that's meant to meaningfully engage homeless young people. And 3, developing a meaningful connection to youth in the community is one way to help do ethical research, although it's not guaranteed. It's also a way to mobilize findings from your research in real time with the people who helped create it. Rather than just praying for the day your publication is adopted by a policymaker, you can mobilize some of your findings from your work right now. In conversations with youth, basic needs kept coming up time and time again. Even when it was possible, having their basic needs met just wasn't enough for youth to thrive. They told me they'd missed out on things like holidays and vacations, things you simply don't get when every day is about survival. So, in the summer of 2019, to demonstrate that youth need to have more than just their basic needs covered, I ran a fundraiser to bring 2 youth who were actively experiencing homelessness from St. Catharines to Ottawa capital city for Canada Day weekend. Raising money turned out to be a really great way to share some of the research findings across the city. At the same time, people were so inspired by what they learned that we raised well over our goal. The girls got to buy whatever they wanted. They got clothes, we visited lots of animals, we visited museums, and in the end they even got matching tattoos. On Canada Day, they went on CBC to raise awareness about youth homelessness. Evidently, academic journal articles are not the only way to highlight our research findings. Most youth I talked to also told me that they wanted to do some kind of post-secondary education. Yet we already know they face many barriers to get in there. More than 50% of homeless youth don't graduate high school, compared to a national average of 9%. So at the end of 2019, a group of former research participants and friends came together to help establish Carleton University's first bursary to support a youth who's been homeless in getting a degree of their choice. That year, we raised more than $30,000, and in the process, we had lots of important conversations across the city. For example, when we talked to small business owners, they started thinking about the ways that they might be able to help in the future. We also named the bursary after 2 youth who died, and this was really important to us. The mortality rate for street-involved youth is much, much higher than for housed youth. The bursary was a wonderful way to collaborate with young people in mobilizing the research findings that they contributed to. This year, our group raised the Chicken and Boots Bursary Fund to over $45,000, and we're going to continue to build on this. Just by virtue of its existence, the bursary started important talks on campus. Administrators were shocked by the amount of applicants they received. They hadn't realized how many incoming students have experienced homelessness, but now they want to address it. I'm still combing through the research transcripts and findings 3 years after it began. I still haven't published anything. Even when I do, it might very well be that nobody gives a hoot. Nobody reads it. But today I've tried to share with you some of the things I've done over the last couple of years to try to make sure this research has impact as it progresses. People always ask me, how can I help a homeless youth? And it's really hard to answer. As individuals, we can't just snap our fingers and bring about major social change. But we can all ask ourselves, what affordances do I have that I can share? When I got off the streets, someone gave me the opportunity to work on their horse farm. And that really, really helped me sustain my exit from homelessness. Because of that opportunity, I know lots of horse people and farms across the city who'll all let me go and visit. So that's one affordance I have that I can and do frequently share with the young people I know. Whether you're a researcher or not, we can all think about how we might share our affordances. What you do to help will be unique to you, not only in terms of your affordances, but also in terms of your personal comfort level and boundaries. And you should never do something that feels unsafe to you. If you are a researcher, I urge you to think about how you might work immediate benefits into your study design, as well as come up with innovative ways to mobilize your findings sooner rather than later. Helping others also helps us too. Not only does it strengthen our communities, but I've also found it to be an invaluable piece of my own healing journey. Try it out and see what it does for you.